Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. A fork in the road. That is the language the U.S. Office of Personnel Management is using to buy out federal employees. Essentially, to save the new administration the hassle of going through one by one and firing people, federal workers can choose to self-deport, if you will. One senior administration official told NBC News that they expect between 5 to 10% of federal workers to take the offer, which allows them to continue receiving pay and benefits for 8 months into September as they look for another job. Now, despite the generous payout, the official says it will still save the government about $100 billion, yes with a B, dollars in the long run. Those who choose to stay must abide by strict new rules to enforce excellence, and that includes going back to work in the office. Now, the way this mass email went out to 2 million federal workers has some wondering if Doge's Elon Musk wrote it, since it uses some similar language to his mass firing over at Twitter, now X. It has also sparked a lawsuit from 2 federal workers who claim that it somehow violates privacy rules to mass email everyone all at once about their future employment. Now, if you ask me, and no one did, but here you go, if you ask me, these are the sorts of federal workers who need to self-deport. I mean, how obnoxious and also pathetic. Is this what the resistance movement from within the Trump government has been reduced to? I love it. Now, speaking of the courts, President Trump is already casting out dozens of officials from their perch at USAID as he freezes large amounts of foreign and federal aid. Now, a federal judge in D.C. who is a Biden appointee is temporarily blocking the freeze on federal aid, even though it applies to superfluous grants that need to be looked over instead of to Social Security or to other forms of direct payment to Americans, which are not being hindered by Trump's order. Joining us now to discuss is military defense attorney Davis Younts. Davis, thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, Kara.
Great. So finally, someone's taking a weed whacker through federal spending instead of just talking about it, right?
Oh, this is so encouraging that we see an administration that's not only following through on campaign promises, but they're developing smart and efficient ways to trim the fat in the federal bureaucracy. So this is fantastic.
It really is, and it helps to get rid of the deep state problem as well, right? All those people who maybe think, well, I'll stick around and I'll see what I can do against Trump. Well, I think 8 months of payment and no work, you can look for another job. I think a lot of them are going to take that. It saves us money in the long run. We don't have to deal with them anymore. I think it's wonderful. I remember every time that I've been to Washington, D.C., you look at those massive federal buildings and you think, how are there really thousands and thousands of people working inside there? And also, what are they doing all day? It's incomprehensible to me, unnecessary, unneeded. Over at X, or at Twitter before it became X, right? Musk did a very similar thing. He fired a bunch of people and things work better, actually. So let's become more efficient, more streamlined. Now, it's interesting to me, right, that at least 1 or 2 federal workers are saying that the mass email aspect of this, that is a privacy violation. What do you make of that argument?
Listen, that seems to me to be an extremely frivolous contention, an extremely frivolous lawsuit. You work for the federal government. To say that a federal government agency, particularly working directly for the executive branch that you're a part of, shouldn't have access to your email that's just absurd. It's frivolous. But, you know, there is a lot of panic among the federal workforce, people that don't want to return to the office. Only 6% of the federal workforce is actually working full time in their offices. And, you know, there's this fear of accountability throughout the bureaucracy that's there. So this is the way to trim the fat. This is a way to force people back into the office, force people to actually do a job. And again, this to me is just a larger recognition of there is no federal government bureaucracy that is out there solving problems on a regular basis. Every program, every incentive in the way we have done funding for federal bureaucracies just creates an incentive for the problem to grow and to hire more people. This is a great and simple step in the right direction. So they don't have to go through individual firing processes for each of these people. They're offering them a very generous severance package to walk away, to not have to come back into the office anymore, to not have to work under the Trump administration. So it's going to be fascinating to see how many people take them up on it.
That it will. And, thinking back to President Trump's first term in office, remember the resistance movement from within the federal government itself? We had books coming out by Anonymous, right? We had people going on CNN and MSNBC trying to indict the Trump administration. We had impeachment shams. We had so many lies and scandal, all this fake nonsense coming out. And now President Trump, he's back and he's better than ever. And the resistance movement, they've got nothing. A little lawsuit of, you violated my privacy somehow. I think it's funny. I think it's great. I think President Trump is doing too much good work and too fast. He's making a lot of voters very, very happy about their vote from 2024. And that's something you rarely, almost never see in politics, right? It's usually you vote for someone and you hope that they're going to do maybe even 10% of what they promise. President Trump is paying back dividends for voters, and CNN has just reduced Jake Tapper crying to Stephen Miller saying, but this is mean the way he talks about some federal workers, as if they haven't called us deplorable and almost treated us like second-class citizens this entire time. It's quite funny. And then Miller just shoots back saying like 70% of federal workers, when they give donations politically, it goes to Democrats. So, it's been great to see they really don't have anything. Nothing's really sticking. And now even when it comes to the foreign aid, that also is under a freeze, so it can be examined before it goes out or maybe get stopped entirely, because as we saw, there's about $50 million that was supposed to go to Gaza for condoms. So stuff like that, thankfully, when it's frozen, it's being ended. But I have a clip I want to show you, and it's actually the former president of Kenya. And I couldn't agree with the man more, but first let's roll the tape and get your reaction afterward.
I saw some people the other day crying, oh, I don't know, Trump has removed money. He said he's not giving us any more money. Watu wanalia. Why are you crying? It's not your government, it's not your country. He has no reason to give you anything. I mean, you don't pay taxes in America. He is appealing to his people. Shauri yenu bwana. This is a wake-up call for you to say, okay, what are we going to do to help ourselves? Instead of crying.
I think that end part that he said right there is so powerful. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, so many. First of all, listen, our government has been so irresponsible with spending. We're just printing money. It's crushing our own economy. It's crushing our own people. And we're doing things like spending $50 million to send condoms to Gaza. These are, slush funds, corrupt slush funds for foreign, oligarchs to benefit when we can't even get aid to the people in Western North Carolina or even in California for these fires. So you're just seeing a prioritization of the American people and just this practical approach that says we can't continue to spend money on foreign countries that we don't have when we can't even be reasonable about a budget. So this is just all a mentality shift. You're seeing President Trump coming in prepared to lead and bringing the idea and concepts of a businessman that looks at things that are unnecessary, that are not effective, that are not functioning well in our government, and saying, let's change that because we can and we know how. We have far too much money being spent and not enough of it is being used to do things that actually benefit the American people.
And I guess just what gets me, though, as I think about President Trump and everything, all the progress he's making already a week into it, right? That's all it's been so far, a week, and so much has happened. And I think back to all those other failed Republican presidents, failed Republican senators, other Republicans who were ever in any position of power. And what did they always tell us? Oh, it's going to take years. You think I can just, snap my fingers and wave a magic wand and everything will be fixed? And it turns out, kind of. There's a lot that actually can be fixed by, as Obama, maybe he's regretting it now, but when he said, oh, I just pick up my paper, got my pen, and I can change everything. Well, maybe he's starting to regret it, right? Because President Trump is using that same executive power, but for so much good. And it just shows how much of a lie that we were lied to for so long. And I know we're all talking about this person in politics. They're a liar. They lied. And maybe the word, it seems like it's lost all meaning in this context, but really sitting and thinking about it, we were truly, truly lied to, that there was so much from abortion to immigration, crime, so much the economy, so much of it could have been fixed if we had Republicans in office who wanted to fix it. They chose not to. They played along with the establishment Democrats, kept giving money out to all these friends and this person and that person. Even as us Americans, we got nothing in return for. Our taxes went up, inflation went up. We got screwed over left, right, and center, and they didn't care, and they lied to us every single election cycle. And part of me says that's why they hate Trump so much, because Trump showed they've been lying this whole time. A lot of this can actually be done in a very concrete way. But I also do want to ask you, because especially under what we've seen with Biden, it seemed like what was private, what was public, it seemed like there was really no line, right? That line got so blurred that big government and so much of business became just melded into each other. And I say that because on social media, you see some trying to pull at the Christian heartstrings. These are liberals and progressives who, right, they're going to try and use our religion against us. They don't even understand the tenets of it, but they're saying there are some Christian ministries that will not survive if President Trump keeps this freeze on funding for them, on grant money and the like. And then, I have from Eric Tietzel, he's from the Center for Renewing America, and he just said an entity that cannot survive absent federal funding isn't a ministry at all, it's a federal agency. So does that speak to just so much of the ills that we have today that are just, it's the government that found backdoor ways in the private world to do its dirty dealings that it couldn't otherwise do legally?
Absolutely. If there is an entity, whether it's a religious organization or not, that cannot survive without government funding, that raises two questions. One, what is your priority? Who are you working for? And two, what is it that you're doing for the government? I mean, the reality is we know there were large charities, so-called religious charities, that were essentially engaging in human trafficking in order to recruit and bring in illegal immigrants and move them throughout the country. And they were doing it at the behest of the Biden administration. And as a result, there have been disastrous consequences for the American people, and really the people we should care about, which is the people that live in our own communities and are impacted by this inflow of violent and unvetted illegal immigrants to our country. So these cries are absurd. And again, they're coming from people who are so dedicated and tied into the DC establishment and the uniparty that it is hard to take them seriously. And I think we can see one thing that's clear from President Trump is if you are ruthlessly efficient and you have a game plan, you can reduce the size of government, you can reduce spending. But the other thing we're seeing is worldview is everything. We are dealing with ideologues. We are dealing with communist progressives, and too many in the Republican Party have been unwilling to have a worldview that answers that. They simply want power and to survive and to have comfort, and we have to change that. And I think President Trump is showing this. Our worldview, our faith is everything, and it does determine our destiny.
That it does. Davis, great analysis as always. Thanks for joining us tonight.
It's left to men like Davis Younts to fight for these Navy SEALs.
R. Davis Younts, you are an attorney who has successfully defended naval officer.
Davis Younts has been instrumental in defending service members.
Davis Younts successfully defended an evangelical Navy lieutenant